It is election day tomorrow. One of the most fascinating races is the gubernatorial race in Mississippi. There, a popular Democratic incumbent state attorney general, Jim Hood, is running against Republican Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, and the polling has them essentially neck and neck. But here's the problem. Neck and neck isn't good enough in the state of Mississippi. Even if Hood were to eke out a narrow victory in deep red Mississippi, which in these polarized times itself would be amazing, he probably will not be governor. In fact, the estimates are that the Republican lieutenant governor, the Republican candidate, could lose by up to 9 points in the popular vote and still be named the next governor. How, you ask, is that possible? Well, it turns out the state constitution of Mississippi has its own version of something like the Electoral College. In order to be elected governor, a candidate has to win an outright majority in the statewide vote, but also carry the most votes in a majority of Mississippi's 122 House districts. So let's just say your support is concentrated in heavily black districts in the very segregated environs of Mississippi. It's going to be real hard to carry a majority of the House districts. And if a candidate doesn't win both a majority of the popular vote and a majority of those districts, well, then the Mississippi House of Representatives, which is overwhelmingly Republican and massively gerrymandered, gets to pick the governor. So, why on earth would the framers of the Mississippi State Constitution of 1890 have done this? Luckily, they were extremely explicit about their intentions at the time. In 1889, Senator James George was predicting that African Americans would soon outnumber white voters in the state 2-1, so he called for a new constitution that would ensure, quote, home government under the control of the white people of the state. One of the framers of that new constitution was a man named James K. Vardaman, who would go on to become a U.S. Senator and governor of Mississippi. Here's how he put it, quote, there is no use to equivocate or lie about the matter. Mississippi's Constitutional Convention of 1890 was held for no other purpose than to eliminate the N-word from politics. In other words, after white supremacists in the South used violence and terrorism to beat back universal male suffrage for everyone, black and white, during Reconstruction, they then put into place explicitly white supremacist, anti-majoritarian governing structures to preserve white control of the state at all costs. That included as well poll taxes and literary tests designed to suppress the black vote, which have since been struck down. But despite the fact that the gubernatorial voting system is pretty clearly unconstitutional, it has not been struck down. It is still the law 129 years later.
Shalom, I give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Rakakodash. I give double honors to our apostles and elders, great millstones. Salutations to all you sincere brothers pushing his word out across the four corners of the earth. This is an article from NPR.org, and the title says, Black Voters Sue Over Mississippi's Jim Crow Era Election Law. This was published on September the 24th, 2019. Mississippi voters will be choosing a governor and other statewide offices in November under a unique set of election rules that date to the 19th century. A federal lawsuit by 4 African-American citizens is challenging the system as racially discriminatory. The target of the lawsuit is what was called the Mississippi Plan, codified in the state's 1890 Constitution to take political power out of the hands of African Americans, and it was extremely effective, says Paloma Wu, an attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center's Mississippi office. The Constitutional Convention was called after Reconstruction, when African Americans were winning elected office after the Civil War. The framers explicitly stated it is the manifest intention of this convention to secure to the state of Mississippi white supremacy, according to the Journal of the Proceedings. It was headlined to keep political power in the hands of white people who were outnumbered by free black people and their descendants, Wu says. So it should be in the mindset of every so-called Negro to ask themselves, since we came here off of slave ships to the shores of America, why are we consistently suffering from racial discrimination? And that can easily be answered according to the Holy Bible. Because you so-called Negroes are part of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. We had a contract with the Heavenly Father to abide by his laws, statutes, and commandments as a total people, along with the so-called Hispanics and Native Americans as well. I'm focusing more on the so-called Negroes because this article is more referencing to so-called Negroes. So we broke those laws, statutes, and commandments as a people Therefore, Yahweh got very aggravated at us as a people, and he scattered us across the four corners of the earth. That's why we were suffering from racism or fighting for or trying to protest for equal rights, because that's the astonishment that Yahweh has put on us as a people. And this is Jeremiah 29th chapter and the 18th verse. And I will persecute them with the sword. And this is talking about you Israelites, with the famine and with the pestilence, and will deliver them to be removed to all the kingdoms of the earth. So that's why you see so-called Negroes in all these different other lands or countries, because that was part of the curses pursuant to Deuteronomy 28 chapter and 64 verse. It was going to be scattered everywhere. That's why it says in the book of Isaiah that he was going to toss us like a ball into a large country. That's that translated slave trade. We're just from one part of the country to the other part of the country, which is like a large ball being tossed to and fro. To all the kingdoms of the earth to be a curse and an astonishment and a hissing and a reproach among all the nations where I have driven them. So that's why we are facing this term called white supremacy, because it's for the betterments of these so-called Caucasians, who are the biblical Edomites. This is their system. This is their empire. This is their rulership right now. So by you trying to follow the ways of this so-called white man, it's not going to get you anywhere further in this country. Which leads me to Jeremiah, the 2nd chapter and the 33rd verse. Why trimmest thou thy way to seek love? So why shed off your clothing as being an Israelite to fit in this so-called white man's system? This is a system that had been consistently oppressing you and your people ever since we got here for hundreds of years. That's why we are continually suffering from racial discrimination, fighting for so-called equal rights, being the first fired and last hired, because these other nations know exactly who we are. So by us trying to trim our ways to seek love from them, it's not going to work out. So why trimmest thou thy way to seek love? Because this system is not meant for you. So by you so-called Negroes going out to these voting polls, wearing those dumbass stickers on your shirts, thinking that you have accomplished something, it's not for the betterment of you. Because when this U.S. Constitution was written, you so-called Negroes wasn't a part of that. It wasn't for the betterment of you as a people. Because according to the U.S. Constitution, you so-called Negroes are still considered as 3/5 of a man. So why trimmest thou thy way to seek love? Because this system is not for us. That's why it says in Micah, the 2nd chapter, that this is not your rest. America is not for us to be comfortable here, trying to achieve the American dream and live so happily ever after. Therefore hast thou also taught the wicked ones thy ways. And another point, that this law has been in effect well over 100 years. So that's why it says in the book of Ecclesiastes, the 1st chapter, that which is crooked cannot be made straight. This is how Yahweh Bashan Shah has spiritually designed this so-called white man to be deceiving. So by his ways and his laws and his legislations are be very deceitful. And you so-called Negroes are still trying to trim your way to seek love by being accepted by this so-called white man. He was made crooked from the beginning. All right, this is Isaiah, the 33rd chapter and 22nd verse. For Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is our judge. Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is our lawgiver. Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is our king. He will save us. So Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is going to be the only one to get those spiritual curses off of us as a people. Get that stigma off of us, that reproach, those astonishments off of us. He's going to save us out of the land of our captivities where we've been scattered to. Not voting for this so-called white man who is your top enemy according to the scriptures. So only Yahweh Ba'ashem Shai is the only one going to get us out of this captivity, because he's the one that put it on us. Therefore, he's the only one that can take it off of us, not this so-called white man, not voting. Because you voting for this so-called white man or just even a Negro that's in office, it's not in your best interest. That so-called Negro or Hispanic that's in office or whatever, they're not for the betterment of you so-called Negroes or Latinos, Hispanics as well. So by you voting, thinking this so-called white man has you in his best interest, you're being straight lied to. And this has been going on for ages. You thinking that your votes are counting, and it's not counting. The so-called white man is the devil that the Bible speaks about. He's going to deceive you. But since you've been voting here in America, nothing has been better for you as a people. That's why you're still in 2019 going to 2020 fighting for equal rights, or fighting against racial discrimination, and just totally fighting for being accepted here in America. This is Zephaniah, the 3rd chapter, and the 8th verse. Therefore wait ye upon me, said Yahweh, until the day that I rise up to the prey. So the only one's going to be in that mindset is the elect of the nation of Israel. Lord willing, we're a part of it. But we are the ones that are hoping and quietly waiting for the salvation of Yahweh Bashem Shai. 2/3 of the nation of Israel, they want their goodies now. That's why they are continually protesting and voting, because they want their kingdom right now. And that's not going to fit in the ways of Yahweh Bashem Shai. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them my indignation, which goes into his righteous anger. That's why Yahweh Bashem Shai is going to gather all these other nations and bring them over there to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which means the Most High's judgment. And he's going to plead with them. That's where it goes into World War III, Armageddon. Even all my fierce anger for all the earth should be devoured with the fire of my jealousy. And Yahweh Bashem Shai, he's mad because you touched the apple of his eye. And that's where he's going to use those nuclear missiles, which are to fire his jealousy. And that's how he's going to judge these other nations. And he's going to get America, and America is going to be burned into ashes. So you're going to see a more detailed video just going into black voting in Mississippi. It just further proves that your votes do not count, so-called Negro. It was never meant to be set up for you to achieve until you obtain this American dream and for you to live happily ever after. So with that, I hope you all were edified. Like, give all honor and glory again to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors again to our apostles and elders, great millstones. Salutations to all you sincere Akim. Shalom.
Thousands of Mississippians are finding their access to the polls blocked by a law more than a century old. It was initially developed to discriminate. 16 WAPT investigates the effects the law is still having now.
The fight for voter equality took a sinister turn after the Civil War, when southern states focused on black men who'd just broken the chains of slavery and gained the right to vote. Mississippi led the way in crafting those laws.
Here at the old Capitol, a constitutional convention was convened. The goal was simple.
You have the 1890 Constitution, and it was rewritten specifically to dilute the black vote, and not even dilute, but to eliminate the black vote.
It was the legal disenfranchisement of blacks.
It's a fact. James Vardaman said the reason we actually are creating this new Constitution is to keep the N-word from voting. That's what Vardaman said.
Nearly 130 years later, a provision in the 1890 Constitution still looms over the value of our votes and who gets to lead our state. It's not as simple as whoever gets the most votes is the winner.
Even in the governor's race, you might win the popular vote, but if you didn't win the majority, being 50% plus one, then it will go to the legislature to determine the winner.
Along the way, another group of people found their rights stripped away in Mississippi. Ex-convicts. There are 22 crimes on the state books that, if committed by a citizen, could cause them to lose their right to vote. According to public policy group One Voice, nearly 220,000 Mississippians were disenfranchised as of 2016. Of that group, just 7% were incarcerated at the time. Even after paying fines or serving their jail sentence, the remaining 93% can't vote for life. Drilling down further into the numbers, nearly 128,000 people in that group are African American. One Voice says that's 16% of those disenfranchised.
There are mothers who have wrote a check with insufficient funds who have lost their voting rights. There are people with shoplifting charges like that have lost their voting rights in Mississippi, who never served a day in jail.
But that vote is important because now when you register to vote, you become somebody who can sit on the jury and determine, based on the information given, if this person should be sent to prison.
There are groups advocating for ex-convicts to get their vote back, and there are people challenging the law of the land. Just days ago, a U.S. district judge refused to strike the 1890 provision down before the general election. But the judge did express grave concern that the rule is unconstitutional, which means it will likely be revisited in the future.
Why should I have to go through 2 elections to hold one job? If the people of this state determine the winner, then so be it. We shouldn't defer to a select group of people to make the final decision.
Now, there is no word yet on when the federal judge hearing the case will make a decision. Whether the judge rules for or against removing that constitutional provision, it is likely that appeals from both sides will be filed in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans.